my cellar. Just saw something. Oh, that's what that is. Okay. Yeah, sorry. Think I'd be more ready. We're going to start off with a comment on what I ended the last one with. I love your idea of using the suffix kind or the older kin instead of the now foolishly taboo race. It rolls off the tongue well, humankind, elvenkind, etc. I will not wait for WotC to remove their heads from their collective backsides. I'm going to adopt this as canon for my personal campaign right now. And you know what? If all of us did that, we could start a movement, a groundswell. And who knows? Maybe the wizards that have to follow. I'm just saying, you know, if this debate keeps going, it's one way to look at it. All right. I have a story to share with you about when I was in elementary school. Well, I don't know how many years ago that was because I don't know this Webster's age. Anyway, I found the library catalog that had listings for the DMG, Player's Handbook, Fiend Folio, and Monster Manual. The books were not on the shelf listed when I then asked the librarian for help in finding them. She told me that school stopped buying new ones because they never got returned. I came across the same books that were never returned years later in a box of stuff that a friend's older brother left off after he went to college. The books had the library return envelope attached inside them. I flipped through the pages. They were well used and scribbled in with notes. The books may still be in the same box today. Well, if it's an old enough edition, they might be worth some money. However, I certainly do not condone taking library books out of your school, out of your public library, or anything. I have a personal experience with that. I provided my Hamilton County, Cincinnati Hamilton County Library with a couple of copies of the anthology I had a story in, and the one that was in the branch that I live by, my branch, got stolen. So I had to provide another one, and I hope to God that one doesn't get stolen because I don't think there are any more copies. I certainly don't condone, taking library books. No. Next question. Can you please list your top 10 wandering monsters? Well, if they're outdoors, I like bugbears and poulets, obviously. I don't have I try to make, if I have a wandering monster, let me back up here. If I'm going to use a wandering monster, I try to make it germane to the environment they're in. That said, it could, if there's a group of beings that they're trying to flush out or what they're trying to affect, a wandering monster could be one of them coming up behind them, all unaware. Or wandering monsters have been a tool for DMs to get the parties back going again. But I only use them under certain circumstances where they could be, in my mind, justified. Your mileage may vary. I've read the story online that the origin of the Cleric is that another PC called Sir Fang had grown too powerful in the campaign, so Gary added the class to counter him. Do you know how true this story is? Did you ever play a pre-Cleric game with just fighting men and magic users? To the last question, no. First game I played in was in the little round box, those 3 books. Now, something doesn't quite ring true about this story. I don't know that it isn't true. But having said that, this might be reference to the very early stages of what was then Dave's game, Dave's idea of a game, And it could have been... I don't recall an old character named Sir Fang. Doesn't mean there wasn't one. I simply don't. I don't know how a cleric could be used as a counter unless he was a paladin type or a high level super good guy who could somehow compel Sir Fang, who I'm guessing was a bad guy, to change his evil ways. Don't know. Can't give you can't give you a definitive answer there. It just, without any more background, I think that's just might be bits and pieces of what somebody thought they heard. I don't know. Talk of video game modding and custom scenarios reminded me of my youth playing the original StarCraft and Warcraft 3 online. Sure, there were the standard game rules, but me and my friends mostly spent time playing the wealth of custom games where people turned these simple real-time strategy games into RPGs, diplomacy, adventure games, dodgeball, or whatever else they could come up with and squeeze out of the engine. Even made a few myself in my spare time. The entire MOBA, and I'm not exactly sure what that means, genre grew out of a Warcraft 3 mod, Defense of the Ancients, which itself was a reimagining of StarCraft custom map, Aeon, I'm guessing, of Strife. Well, that's the thing about us gamers. Once we become, at least in our own minds, serious gamers, whatever that definition may be. I think one way to tell when that happens is when you start going, oh, that rule's dumb, it should be. And so you've got an idea for something else. And whether it's a role-playing rule or a board gaming rule or a miniatures rule, everybody's a critic. Everybody's a critic. And I don't know. We all want to. I think it's encouraging. I think it's good. I think it's healthy that we all want to tinker with games. Way back in the day, grade school days, I tinkered with rules of different games, just fooling around with them. Everybody that ever played Monopoly with all the money in the center of the board and you get it on free parking has played with a tinkered game. Lots of families had family rules for various games, Tripoli or whatever they were playing. It's a natural thing, I think, when we even if we don't like a game, we tend to say, well, wouldn't it be better if and so we're critical, and I think that's a good thing because it forces the industry to put out quality. Let's see. Would you allow a player to run multiple characters simultaneously during a campaign? Provisionally, yes. Would it be possible for a player that has... All right, we'll stop there. I would let them have multiple, but they could only have one at a time. Run one at a time. We used to have multiple, but we could only run one at a time. Isn't it odd we use that word run? Because you're running a character. You're also playing the character, but you're running that one. That word has been around since the very beginning, as far as I know. I know I've been using it for eons, or aeons. Another question. Would it be possible for a player that has gauntlets of ogre strength stacked with a belt of giant strength to be able to hold and use 2 or more swords at the same time to inflict double or triple damage, etc.? Okay, I see a problem here. Number one, as a DM, how many of these really good things do you scatter about? Has this individual acquired them over the course of a year, 4 years, 6 years? I would have a real problem with putting anything of that magnitude, that potency. I would have a real problem putting more than a couple of those in a campaign at any given time, because this is the problem. Stacking. I don't agree in stacking. Your best one is what it does. If one is 3 times and the other one is 2 times, then it's 3 times. It's not 5 times. Not in Tim's world. Not any game I'll ever design or work on the design or help in the design of or even edit. That's the power gaming that I don't personally like one bit. Whichever one is more powerful would be the one that trumped. That would be the one that I would be considered. That's the way it used to be. And no, I wouldn't make having that as granting the benison of being able to fight with 2 swords simultaneously. But that's me. I wouldn't, because it's too much of a ramp up. It's like, oh, hell, now I'm Superman and bullets bounce off. Who wants Superman in their game where the swords bounce off? It might appear to be, it might seem to be appealing, there we go. Might seem to be appealing to be that Superman character, but hey, that gets boring too. I'll just go kill some more stuff today. That's boring. The fun in the game is the struggle, the strife. That is what has always been there for me in RPGs. The struggle, the strife. I've also always run a scaled down campaign in terms of my economy, the money that's floating around. I know of many, many campaigns where finding 100 gold pieces is like, meh. In one of my campaigns, finding 100 gold pieces is like finding $1,000 or $1,200 or even $1,400 today. Wow. A lot of clout, a lot of power there, a lot of things that'll get you. It's a good way to keep the campaign's economy under control. The other one's inflation. That's the way I would do it. Whichever was the better one would be the one that ruled. Excuse me, I have to look and see what my cats are into. Hey! Pardon me. Get out of there. They're going off to the vet early in the morning. Snip, snip. I believe in keeping the pet population down. Okay, this has been gone over endlessly, but I wanted to get your take, if I might. Ghoul paralysis is specified as affecting normal figures, except elves, in Monsters and Treasure. This language comes from chainmail. Yes, perceptive. What does it mean in OD&D? It means normal figures were humans. I'll go on. As far as I can tell, it means first level humans, but not dwarves, elves, or hobbits. Right. Not them. Am I reading that right? Yes. The normal figures I'm trying to identify. Humans. Ghouls are a product of the human imagination. In all the cultures where you find something that's ghoulish or ghoul-like or equivalent of a ghoul, it's something they've conjured up themselves from superstition, and it has a a tremendous amount of its impact is on the mind. The raw, primal fear / paralysis. The paralysis induced by the fear. Ghouls are a product of our imagination, therefore they affect us. A ghoul, to an elf or a hobbit or a dwarf, I don't know that I don't know how they would perceive them. Particularly ugly or dead looking. The effect ghouls have is based on a collective of the various traditions, cultures, and folklores that have ghouls. And when Gary created the ghoul, he took the big things. Just a minute, please. Hi, I'm back. Sorry about that. I had to get a cat off the pool table because they were messing around. They won't be feeling quite so good for the next couple of days. They're feeling it tonight. Ghouls are a particularly human type thing. There's a ghoul-like entity in just about every mythology and culture you go, from the Celts. I can't speak on Sumerian and Babylonian, but from the Celts onward, just about every culture has an equivalent of a ghoul, and they're so horrid, so horrible, so abhorrent that they exert this primal, mind-numbing, paralyzing fear. All right, now we're gonna go on with some more stuff that's like this. Yeah, normal figures are humans because it's a human monster. If the dwarves have some mythological or cultural belief of some monster that we have no concept of, works that way too. Unless one of them attacks, I guess, but then how's that going to happen? You mentioned turning undead. I'm sure you may have addressed this before, but when a cleric turns an undead and they have nowhere to run, do they cower and let people destroy them? Well, number one, it would depend on the type of undead, wouldn't it? If they're gonna get to a gaseous form, they can always get away. If they're really fast, But if they were cornered, I would think that I would play that the turn is no longer affected and they're going to attack to save their lives, and maybe even a ramped up degree of attack, just because they're trapped and they know it. I determined that they are afraid of the cleric and cower from him or her, but will still fight others if someone else attacks them. I'm curious how others do this as well. All right. One cleric in a group of players, there's an undead encountered. The cleric successfully... Oh, there's the culprit. The cleric successfully turns the undead. He's not going to just ignore the cleric. He's going to turn him. Get thee gone. Drive it away. Force it to shamble off. That's the way I interpret it. Based on what I've read, based on what I've watched, that's the way I interpret it. If it were the other way around, that it would only protect the clerics from the undead, who needs that guy in the party who's immune to something that you will wet your pants at the thought of? Not nearly the risk that they're taking to get the same amount of loot. And then someone followed up on that. What about trapped, turned, undead get a penalty for fighting rolls, and try to escape at every opportunity. Or perhaps they turn on each other and do the dirty work for the PCs. Maybe, if the cleric is several levels higher, they just wither up, desiccate, and blow away as a cloud of dust. Any of those are viable ways to handle that in your campaign. I would think that when they realized they were trapped with no way out, they would fight maniacally. A little easier to hit, but hitting a little easier and hitting a little harder from frenzied blows. Not defending, they'd be a little easier to hit, but if they hit you, ooh, it would hurt. If that occasion occurred, that's how I would probably handle it. And I say probably because I can say that now, and circumstances leading up to it might preclude that action and demand something else entirely. And yeah, I might let them wither them to dust if they got them trapped, but I don't know, that one's a little harder to explain. Hang on, please. I'm going to have to smack the cat again. I apologize. I have a very ill-behaved cat tonight. Now he was climbed up into one of my shelves and was chewing on a set of headphones. I think they're only 6 months old. Okay, where was I? Okay. All right, yeah, desiccate and blow away. Perhaps that would be a roll. And it would depend on how good a standing the cleric is with his or her deity, wouldn't it? At least it would in my world. What was the most amorphous rule in original D&D? Amorphous. Well, they were all supposed to be fairly amorphous. The whole point of the original D&D is change it to make it fit you and the way you want it to be and how you like it to feel. Well, I always thought, turning undead, it's odd that we're talking about it, but I always thought that was kind of weird. They just get to do it. And I never was real happy with Gary's explanation. They just get to do it. I thought that was a little vague. Most amorphous rule in AD&D. I don't know. They can all be tinkered with and altered and changed to suit you. Well, I don't. There's so many. How can I pick one? But that's why I like it. There's wiggle room inside, and I like it like that. Now, I can answer this next one. One of the advantages or disadvantages to having loose amorphous rules in an RPG. I think the great advantage is that you can tinker with them to suit your group. Find a version you all like to play and then just have fun for years on end. And I'm not being sarcastic. I mean that. Because they can be loosey-goosey. That's why I don't care for the later editions. That's why I don't care for several of the other game systems. They're rigid and they don't allow too much tinkering without losing sight of what they were and coming off the rails. My personal opinion. The greatest advantage is that you can taper it, you can house rule it. I've told you before how my clerics are not like Gary's clerics. My clerics don't do spells. They say prayers. They can say a number of prayers over the course of the day of a certain potency. They don't have to pick them in advance. So they have their whole catechism at hand, or their breviary at hand, or find some other non-Christian, non-Catholic term for their book, Okay, they're grimoire, but it's not a grimoire. They're clerics. It's their prayer book. All right, now here's someone that's talking about One D&D. That name just bugs the shit out of me. What do they think is one ring gonna bind them all? Here's that idea. From what I've seen so far with playtest material, half-breeds are relegated to an optional rule, and there's no longer any mechanical incentive to do it. Good! If you're a half-elf now, you must have the stats of a human or an elf, not a mix of both. I think this is the way to go, since I can just as easily disallow them. It's an optional rule anyway, and none of the munchkins will complain that I took away any character options from them. To be honest, Watsy never quite knew what to do with the half-orcs most of the time anyway. Half-elves and half-orcs were thematically just full orcs anyway, at least since third. Well, if they're going to insist that all the formerly known as races are species, that means there won't be any halvies. No halvies. Yay. Now, I know a few 5e players are not going to like that rule at all. And I know a bunch of old schoolers are going to go, all right, time to get some of the foolishness out. Now there was a response to that. That's interesting, and it's going to upset a lot of players. As a historical note, hold on, please. Hollering at the cats dried me out prematurely. That's interesting, but it's going to upset a lot of players. As in a historical note, half-orcs were identical orcs in their traits in 1E, as per their description in the Monster Manual. So this is, in some ways, returning to the game's roots. That wasn't the case for half-elves, though. It'll be interesting to see how many actually move on to One D&D. Well, yeah, the whole idea of claiming you were a half-orc is you got beefed up points, you got beefed up strength. You had a more robust, vigorous frame, and so therefore you were like really buff without having to do the work. And yeah, I think it is returning to the roots and good. There's several. Dragonkind is probably the one that I know the most about that bothers me the most. Dragonborn. Come on. And I'm really bothered by how such dissimilar kinds, humankind, orckind, how does that go about producing offspring? It seems to me that it would be more through force and fear and retaliation and conquest. Then maybe I'm just narrow-minded and can't see an orc wooing a female. Or are you wooing a human female? Nor can I see a human male wooing an orc female, but that's just my limited old guy imagination, I guess. Yeah, and here's another one. I think the official direction of half races, or species, yes, is to get rid of them. You can do whatever you want at your table, but we won't see individual entries for half elves, half orcs, etc. So, based on your comment, I take that to be a good thing, and I agree, as I've never was a fan of half certain races like they were special or something. Yeah. The only justification for anything that I can think of is found in Tolkien and nowhere else that I'm aware of, and that is that elves can give up their immortality and therefore fall in love and die with humans. Anything else? Excuse me. Anything else beyond that is that there's no fine directions or guidelines for it. And okay, now here's a reference to the Dwarven pony thing, and I'm going to publish this link at the end, so you can go look it up on Wikipedia, because it's what mine ponies were. They were a thing, and of course, the tunnels were built to human-sized miners, whereas dwarves, being smaller, would have to have, and so they couldn't get a full-size horse in there. So the whole thing about mine ponies, they took the word pony to mean a small equine, when at the time of this, the late 19th century, pony was a loosely used term for any equine. And so that's where they came up with Dwarven ponies, mine ponies. Oh, and well, here, I'm sorry. Pony was sometimes broadly applied to any equine working underground. Now, that is a demotion of serious levels. Equine level drain, if you will. Well, okay. But yes, there were, and from somebody picked up that little nugget. And again, that's one of the things that makes role-playing so cool. You pick up little nuggets, you pick up little nuggets here and little nuggets there, and you apply them and you work them into your game, and that's what's fun. Why are elves immune to ghoul paralysis? What is a ghoul paralyzing people with? And I'm going to read the replies. One of them was damn fine question. And the second was, I may be wrong, but I think it's descended from chainmail, where elves are immune to paralysis from wights, this being prior to both ghouls and level drain. In that case, I imagine the wights paralyze their victim through intense fear. Yes. I believe that Gary got the majority of his wight background and substance from the Celtic barrow wights. They're oftentimes malevolent, would trap you in fairy mounds underground or take you back into the tomb with them. Again, they were a concoction of the human mind and therefore scary to humans. And they wouldn't work on elves. Maybe I've also heard, and this goes to the concept of a soul. And elves don't have a soul like humans do, so the wight has no hook, because they would affect the souls with their intense fear and just leave them paralyzed with fear, or perhaps even lose their own volition and follow commands, perhaps. They'd certainly, I know everybody hates level drains, but I think of wight as, if you balance all the mythology of the two and you take away all the current fascination with vampires, I think either one should be capable of draining you of a life level, literally draining you, deteriorating your mind, deteriorating your muscles, deteriorating your organs. They are so the antithesis of something alive. Just like if you put heat and ice cubes together, they'll eventually consume themselves. The heat will melt the ice and the water will put out the fire. That's the way I justify it. Your mileage may vary. It's sort of fun to get into these metaphysical things, but keep in mind that most of the original monsters By original, I mean original D&D, the supplements to D&D were products of mostly European mythology. In many, many European mythologies, or mythos, elves are not nice. They're ornery and they steal babies, and they're not nice. But Tolkien made them nice, and everybody drank at the Tolkien trough. Okay? This is what it is. Things change. It evolves. 200 years from now, some bright college student studying the cultural evolution of mythology will look upon that and go, look at that. Odd. That's all I got. I'll remember to get my guy to publish the link. I'm going to put it at the end of the little intro explanation thing at the beginning, and hopefully he'll also add it on at the end. But as I'm doing this at 1:45 in the morning and he won't see it until sometime tomorrow, I'll just leave him a note. And in the meantime, Dodata Govi. Hello, and welcome to my cellar.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Last man around when the rates went down. Called it Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard's brain. ESR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Titan with tramp under a tree, high as could be. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.